So we will get started with our audience tonight on a snowy evening. This is a venture with the Don Wright Faculty of Music. My name is Betty Ann Yonker. I'm the Dean of the Don Wright Faculty of Music, with the Center for Research and Education on Violence Against Women and Children and the Women's Community House. We're having the Rape of Lucretia performances on campus, and our goal is to use this as a social justice piece as much as it is as a performance, because it's direct focus on an issue that has been around for centuries but has received more attention and more organized focused, I would say, probably in the last generation. And so my job is to welcome everybody, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end of it. Tonight we have with us Barbara McQuarrie from the Center for Research and Education on Violence Against Women and Children, followed by Shelley Yeoh of the Women's Community House. We will then have Theodore Baer, Professor of Voice, talk about the rape, and some performances from our students who are cast in the Rape of Lucretia. So I welcome now to the podium Barbara McQuarrie. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a real honor to be here. In March of this year, there was the 57th session of the Commission on the Status of Women at the United Nations. And they agreed that violence against women and girls is rooted in historical and structural inequality and power relations between women and men, and persists in every country in the world as a pervasive violation of the enjoyment of human rights and fundamental freedoms. It occurs in public and private spheres, is linked with gender stereotypes and other factors that can increase women's vulnerability. In short, it is pervasive, it restricts and limits women's ability to enjoy our lives, and women who are disadvantaged in any way are particularly vulnerable. In Canada, women of all sectors of society are subjected to a vast array of physical, sexual, and psychological acts of violence by intimate partners, as well as stalking, rape, and other sexual violence, sexual harassment, trafficking for the purposes of forced prostitution, female genital cutting, and femicide. The information we have about violence against women in Canada comes from academic research as well as community and government reports. It has been barely 4 decades since we began to recognize and study the problem, and we're just beginning to recognize the full dimensions of this issue. In 1993, Statistics Canada conducted a groundbreaking survey which estimated that 51% of women in Canada experienced at least one incident of sexual or physical violence since the age of 16. That's half of all of the women that you and I know. This figure masks the important detail that shows many women experience not just a single incident, but rather multiple acts of male violence. 1/4 of women who were physically assaulted by a spouse were also sexually assaulted. 87% of women have been sexually harassed. I think it's fair to say that represents normative behavior. This new knowledge exposed the vast dimension of women's experiences of male violence and helped to galvanize action, which led to changes in government policy and support for the work of community and grassroots organization. Unfortunately, that survey hasn't been repeated. Successive federal governments have made their choice quite clear. They prefer not to know. Governments at all levels and policymakers have used that knowledge gap to claw back important feminist gains in research, advocacy, and service provision. Even with less extensive Canadian data gathering, it's clear we have a problem. The main source of information is now Statistics Canada Omnibus Crime Victimization Survey. It estimates that 6% of women, that's 600,000 women, were victims of marital violence in the 5 years prior to being interviewed. 178,000 were assaulted by marital partners just in the previous year. The greatest risk of homicide for women is in their own homes. In addition, 460,000 women are sexually assaulted by men other than marital partners each year. The Native Women's Association of Canada has documented documented 582 cases of missing and murdered Aboriginal women. If this figure were applied proportionately to the rest of the female population, there would be over 18,000 missing Canadian women and girls. In 2013, Human Rights Watch investigated the relationship between the RCMP and Indigenous women and girls in northern British Columbia, where numerous women have gone missing or been found murdered on a stretch of road known as the Highway of Tears. They uncovered a, quote, double failure of policing, widespread apathy by police towards the disappearances and murders of Aboriginal women, as well as serious physical and sexual abuse against women and girls perpetrated by police themselves. Challenges in collecting data lead to an underestimation of violence against women. Much of women's experiences of violence still remain hidden. Police statistics are a common source of information on violence against women, but they can't provide valid estimates of the prevalence of violence because only 8% of sexual assaults and only 30% of women affected by spousal violence report to the police. Police also tend to use a series of ongoing related incidents of partner violence as a single incident. This too misrepresents the cyclical nature of the violence. 92% of adult victims of sexual assault who report to the police are women, and women knew their attacker in 3/4 of these assaults. Research in violence against women with disabilities is still in infancy. Women with a condition or health problem that restricts her activities had rates of spousal violence almost twice as high as other women. The Disabled Women's Network of Canada summarized the available research and concluded that women with disabilities experience the same types of violence as other women, but are vulnerable to additional abuse. They face complex barriers to obtaining help as well. For example, women with disabilities experience emotional, physical, and sexual abuse by healthcare providers and others who they rely on for support, as well as higher rates of emotional abuse from both strangers and other family members. They may be prevented from using a wheelchair, cane, respirator, or other assistive devices. Because it's often assumed that women with disabilities don't have intimate relationships, partner violence is especially hidden. They're vulnerable to sexual abuse associated with violations of privacy, strip searches, and sexual assaults by staff and residents of institutions, forced abortion, and forced sterilization. When violence by attendants is detected, it's often treated informally and not brought to the attention of the police. When sexual assault and other forms of violence are investigated by police, there's often a focus on the mental and physical abilities of the women, which can lead to victim blaming. Women in male-dominant work environments are vulnerable to sexual harassment and violence. Over 200 female RCMP officers have brought a class action suit against the RCMP for gender-based discrimination and sexual harassment. A report by the Canadian Forces Military Police tracked an increase in the incidence of marital violence from 33 incidents in 2005 to 103 in 2008. The increase was especially acute at CFB Petawawa and coincided with the return of soldiers from Afghanistan in early 2007. This correlation suggests that male-dominated hierarchical institutions and war may influence the perpetration of spousal violence. Many immigrants and refugees come to Canada having experienced the trauma of war and displacement, which may be linked with experiences of family violence. For refugee and immigrant families, the pressure to maintain their culture, traditions, language, and religious practices may lead to violence if a member of the family begins to integrate into Canadian society in a way that conflicts with these values. Low self-esteem, barriers to integration, and marginalization are some of the potential challenges of migration that may contribute to violence against immigrant and refugee women. The prevalence and causal factors for violence in the LGBTQ communities are understudied areas. Women who identified as lesbian or bisexual were more than 3 times as likely as heterosexual women to experience spousal violence. Sexual exploitation and trafficking are difficult issues to study because they are clandestine activities. The RCMP estimates that approximately 600 women and children are trafficked into Canada each year for sexual exploitation, a figure that fails to account for the number of women and girls trafficked within Canada, and the majority of those are Aboriginal. Younger women under the age of 25 experience the highest incidence of intimate partner violence, sexual violence, femicide, and criminal harassment, more commonly known as stalking. Aging, pregnancy, and disability also represent situations of vulnerability. Women over the age of 65 are more likely than men of the same age to be victims of violence by their marital partners. Why does all this happen? It's a complex question and not one that I can answer fully, but I'll highlight two contributing factors. Toughness and aggression are part of the socially supported ideas about masculinity. Research shows that physical and sexual violence against women are more common behaviors among men who believe that women should stay in traditionally female roles and who believe that men should dominate women. The media, in the form of music, television, movies, music videos, and the internet, present women in narrow, sexualized ways, along with powerful images of masculinity linked to degradation and violence towards women. Pornography eroticizes this degradation and violence. These negative images of women reinforce gender inequality. They produce societal relationships that create and sustain the context in which it is acceptable for men to use violence against women. Now, I want to shift away from the grim picture I've just painted to consider for a few moments what we can do. We have wonderful support services in our community. Shelley's going to tell you about them. They are a vital part of the response to violence against women, so please learn about them and please refer your neighbor, your friend, your family member to them if she is experiencing violence. Keep in mind that women seek help in a variety of ways. Women assaulted by intimate partners are more likely to seek help from friends and family than from formal sources such as police or counselors. 2/3 of women disclose the violence to family members, and about 60% seek help from friends. Only 30% are going to seek help from a counselor, talk to a doctor or a nurse, or report to the police. Even very serious violence is often not reported. Only 60% of women who are beaten, choked, or had a weapon used against them, and only 53% of women who are sexually assaulted by a marital partner seek help from police. Despite the best efforts of abusers to isolate the women they want to control, in most cases, friends, neighbors, and family members are aware that something is going on, that something's not right. The former head of Ontario's Domestic Violence Death Review Committee said, "We can point to almost every case where a woman is killed by her intimate partner and find that somebody knew something, but that they didn't understand the significance of it and they didn't know what to do about it." For many years, we've been working to break the silence that surrounds women abuse. As a society, we can no longer accept that violence against women is a private matter. We have criminal sanctions against it, and we have shifted public attitudes so that few people would say it is acceptable. Now we need to take those efforts a step further. We need everyone to learn about warning signs of violence. We need everyone to learn how to have a difficult conversation when they suspect a woman is experiencing abuse. If you are worried about someone you know, talk to her, let her know you care. Learn about risk and safety planning yourself and share the information with her. Tell her where you can go for help. Abusers always seek to isolate their victims. They have many ways and means of doing this. They may restrict physical movements through force or threat. They may deny means of transportation. They may attempt to alienate friends and families so a woman is increasingly cut off from other people. They erode her sense of self and confidence so she's no longer actively seeking out relationships with others. As a woman's isolation grows, so does her vulnerability to violence. As professionals, we can't help a woman unless she contacts us. But we know that many women can't, many women don't. You don't have to be a hero. You don't have to fix the whole situation. Take small steps. They can make a big difference.